Morning, everybody here in Avas Shalom. Good morning, everybody on YouTube and Torah Anytime. We are back. We are back in our Amud Yomi Shiur, Ezu Neshech, fifth parak of Metzia after our long Pesach break. So let's go. Says the Mishnah. Yeah, this Mishnah should be easy to understand, the first half, because it's very similar to things we've seen before. And let's go. Just to remind you, we have been learning and are learning. And first of all, this year's Lulin Nishma Sobi Moiri Menachem Ben Akiva, Rus Bas Shalom Salbas Moshe, Lofuas Chana Vatzima, Pina Chai Vas Gol Rochel, Ulailu Nishmas, all the people who Loleinu died in the different sad occasions over Cholamoid. Now, one more thing. We remember, I'm sure, that we are learning here about investments that sometimes are traced because they are ribis oriented. Yeah, why? What do you mean ribis oriented? Sometimes there's a chashash avak ribis darabonon. When a person invests, a person gives his friend, let's say, an animal to breed, and he says, this animal is your responsibility, which means if this behemoth is worth 1,000 shekels and is going to go lower in price for whichever reason, even the oinsin, which means it's not your fault. So it's not that you are a regular shomer over the behema. The behema is as if the behema is lent to you, and if the behema dies, you have to give me 1,000 shekels, right? If the behema depreciates in price and now it's 900, you have to give me the entire 100, right? That means that I will always get my money back, whatever happens. That is a form of a loan. It's not a classical loan, but it's similar to a loan. Why? Because Lamaisa, the responsibility, the full responsibility is on the person who got the investment. I call him the worker, okay? And therefore, he'll have to eventually, likely to what? Have to fork out money from his own pocket, and that defines him as a loive. That defines him halachically as a borrower, okay? At least midrabanon. And what does he gain from that? He gains the worker is going to go half-half. In other words, if this behema, if this animal, this cow, let's say, has babies, one baby will go to the investor, another baby will go to the worker, right? So the Maisa, the one who's gaining more is the owner. Why? The owner, the investor, has his money secured, right? And it's like a loan because he will always get the minimum that he invested, the entire thing. That's the case in our Mishnah, actually. And on the other hand, and besides that, he will also get profit from where? From the babies, yeah, or from, let's say, the behema will increase in price. The behema will not be 1,000 shekel, will be 2,000. Then they're going to split it, right? He's going to get go half for the profits. And what? Oh, so we said the way to get out of it is if if the investor pays the worker extra money, that balances it, right? We said that. For example, he pays him for the food and also pays him something small, at least a symbolic amount, to make sure that he gets paid, who? The worker. That balances the numbers, that the worker gets more, and that would be a mutter case. But that's not the case in our Mishnah. Let's read our Mishnah now. Says the Mishnah, Ein mekablin tzoin barzel misoil mipnei shehu ribis. Says the Mishnah like this. What's a tzon barzel? Tzon barzel is a term that we are more familiar with from the word of ksuba, of kiddushin, of a man marrying a woman. Amud base, top of the page of Amud base. Yeah, a person, tzon barzel basically means as follows. The investor, be it a man, a woman, marriage, not marriage. In our case, it's one man who invests with the other, and he gets tzon barzel. What does tzon barzel mean? Tzon is kettle, and barzel is iron. It means to say, tzon barzel means that, just like I explained to you before, the investor knows that his investment is secure and he will never lose not even one dime from that investment, like iron. Just like iron is strong, so too he knows that this is, as strong as iron, that he'll always get the amount that he invested. Like son, just like the shepherd looks after his son, after his flock, after his herd, so too the person who is the worker, yeah, he is the one who's guarding and he's looking after what? The money, the property, the animal, let's say, of the investor, knowing very well that the investor will never lose like iron. So that you're not allowed to have such an agreement, because it's ribis. One way to explain it is Rashi, and this is what I explained to you before. Why is it ribis? Well, we explained it's not real ribis, it's not a real loan and not real ribis, but because the Maisa, the person, the investor, is not losing anything, he's rochok mehefsed, he's not losing anything, and he's gaining more than he's losing, and there's a flare of halva here, that is a milved rabbanon. Tosfos disagrees with Rashi. Right now, I'm going to tell you, Rabbeinu Tam, quoted in Tosfos and in the Ritva, says no. He has many questions on Rashi, and he explains it differently. He explains it that this is ribis d'oraisa, this is real ribis. You know why? Says Tosfos here, besides the fact that there's no loss on the side of the investor, and there's only gaining from the investor side, besides that, the worker, the one who holds the animal, every month or every year, he has to give him a set amount. In other words, for the fact that you have my prized horse or my prized cow that you look after and you're gaining the profits, you have to pay me a monthly fee. And that is for sure ribis d'oraisa, that's ribis ktsutza. Why? You borrowed it, although it's not classical borrowing, but because you'll have to compensate me, the investor, if anything happens, I will always have my 1,000 shekels. If the behemoth goes kaput and dies and the dogs eat it and it's now worth zero, there's not even a carcass, a cadaver, you still have to pay me a whole 1,000. That's halva. Plus, every month you have to give me a set amount. Chutz from the gains. You have to give me a monthly fee because I'm so nice to you and giving you the investment. That already crossed the line of ribis into ribis d'oraisa. That's what Tosfos explains it. Now continues the let's finish the Mishnah. Aval, however, b'kablin tzon bazel mina akum. One is allowed to accept tzon bazel from the goy. If a person is not Jewish, then there's no halacha of ribis, or so at least we think at this point. Yeah, you're allowed to. It says lonochri toshich. You're allowed to take and give ribis to a goy. Therefore, this tzon bazel, this kind of agreement, if you do it with a goy, that's okay. If the goy is the investor, and continues the Mishnah even more, the Mishnah builds it up. The loivin mehen umalvin oisen beribis. Loivin mehen, you're allowed to borrow from a goy and lend to a goy beribis. V'chen beger toishov. Oh, a bigger chiddush a ger toishov. A ger toishov is the goy who accepted upon himself in Bezdin. He accepted upon himself what? To be a noahide. He accepted upon himself to keep the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, the 7 Noachide laws, or according to Rashi, he just accepted not to worship Avodah Zarah. And according to other Rishonim, he accepted the Gimel of Eretz Chamuros. Giluras V'Shkuzdom Avodah Zarah. So then he's a Ger Toshev, is allowed to live in Eretz Yisrael. You know, Ovid Avodah Zarah is not allowed to live in Eretz Yisrael, halachically. According to some Rishonim, not even one night. A Ger Toshev is allowed to stay in Eretz Yisrael. You're supposed to support him financially. However, although he gets treated much, much, much nicer than other goyim because it's a ger toishov, he's an ochide, nevertheless, ribis, you're allowed to give him, in other words, to lend him or borrow him beribis, that is allowed for a goy, for a ger toishov, and let alone a goy. The last part of the Mishnah I'm not explaining because that will be explained later. It's not really today's topic. The last part of the Mishnah says, Malve Yisrael me'oisav shel akum midas akum. Yisrael is allowed to lend the money of a goy, yeah, with the agreement of the goy to Israel, but not from the agreement of Israel. I just translated. I do not understand it. I looked into it and I saw that we're going to see it in 2 days' time. So I decided let's see it in 2 days' time. Metzia Hashem. It's not. Rashi says I'm not better than Rashi. Rashi says mefarish b'gmorah. So I tell you too mefarish b'gmorah. I'm not art scroll. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Ellen, I'd like to hear your beautiful questions. Says the Heilige Gemara. Yeah, frag the Gemara. Before we continue, I just want to now speak in codes to make it easier for you to understand. Let's talk about 2 different scenarios. One person is a person who lent and borrowed. The other person borrowed money, cash, wad of cash. The other one borrowed what? Your drill or your hammer. What's the difference? In English, they're both called borrowing, but they're not the same at all. When a person borrowed cash, who is the current owner of this very cash in the wad of cash, in the envelope? The borrower or the lender? The borrower, $1 million prize to you. Yeah, the borrower. That this very same money, with this serial number money, with this George Washington on the notes, is going to obviously be used by who? By the borrower. He got the money not to display it in his, in his Pesach table. What's he doing there? To use it. Milva. Of course, he has a separate chiyuv to what? To give back other money, right? He's going to go to the ATM tomorrow in a week's time and get other money, give it to the. What about the drill? What about the thrill? What about the hammer? Obviously, it belongs to who? To the owner. Even while you're using the hammer of your neighbor, you know full well that the hammer belongs to the owner. That's all we have to know. Oh, the question is, when a person got an investment, the investor is the owner of the behemoth, and he gave it to the person, to the worker, to work, to the farmer who's going to work and gain and profit, right? And they're going to share and split and all that. Who is in full responsibility of the animal? That if anything happens to the animal, even the oines, he's not a regular shomer. Even the oines, it will always be his achrais, even if the price goes down. It's not his fault. The market price goes down. Instead of 1,000 shekels, now that sheep is worth 800. Who's going to compensate? The worker, the one who got it. That makes him like the owner of the animal, because he's like a person who borrowed the $1,000. Because if this animal is going to die and poof and fly to outer space, I don't know, anything will happen to the animal will burn, the whole thing is not there. Who has to compensate from his own money? Who is that? The borrower? And he's like a borrower, the worker. And therefore, that is considered like halva, and he is like the owner in a way. He's like an owner of the animal. Remember also a concept called, there's a concept called what? Dover girl no moment, come on dummy, right? In other words, we had it in Bavakama, and also after that, if there is anything that would cause me, let's say I have a chiyuv to Beis HaMikdash, I owe an animal to Beis HaMikdash, if somebody steals it from me, now I'll have to give another animal, right? So that is also responsibility, means ownership, because Lamaisa, I'm the one missing the money at the end of the day. It's coming from my pocket at the end of the day. So let's see, says the Gemara, Lememra, that is to say, from our Mishnah we can derive, the Birshusa de Mekabel Kaima, we see that the one who is like, almost like an owner, it's his reshus, in other words, it's his responsibility, full responsibility is who? The Mekabel, the one who received, the worker, the farmer. Okay, the Raminu, we have a problem now, let's now make it face another Mishnah. There's now collision and contradiction between this Mishnah and the Mishnah at B'choros. B'choros, a whole different world. What's the Mishnah? Let's give a small introduction. What's a korban of a B'chor? Anybody wants to tell me what's a korban called B'chor? One of the korbanos in Beis HaMikdash is the B'chor. That's the firstborn male of a cow or a sheep or anything goes to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Now, what? Okay, automatically, right? Or to the Kohen, unless it has a blemish. I'm not talking about that. There's no blemish. It goes to Beis HaMikdash. It's a korban. What happens if I'm partner with a goy? Let's say goy and Jew are partners. A joy and a gu. A goy and a Jew are partners in a behema, and the b'chor is mazel tov. There's a b'chor. Is it kodesh? No. It says in the pasuk Yisrael, the pasuk that tells you about goyim, about the b'chor, the behema of a b'chor, tells you only the b'chor of a behema of Yisrael. If the behema is the goyish behema, it's owned by a goy, or even 10% is owned by a goy. That's what they do today, by the way. Not so proficient in these things, but as far as I know, the way to get out of korban kor today, because today we don't have Beis HaMikdash, so what do they do with all the firstborn animals in Eretz Yisrael? There's a shalom about Chutz La'aretz too, in Eretz Yisrael for sure. They say that goyim have a shutfus. They do some kind of shtick like that, a trick that there's a guy who's like a partner in all the animals born somehow. As far as I know, I don't know the details about it, but that's what I've heard. So now, having said that, let's try and understand the following Mishnah. A person who's a Jew accepted, received exactly the same agreement we spoke about in the Mishnah happened between a goy and a Jew. The owner is the goy. The mekabel, the one receiving and breeding the animal, is a Jew. If you have such a case, the animals born to the Jew, meaning to the animal, and they go to the Jew, the potter min b'choira. I have prepared the whiteboard for that. What the Mishnah says is basically like this: the first generation animal belonging to the goy, if this gave birth to two animals, one is a b'chor, one is not. Even if this one, the b'chor, supposed to go to the Jew, right? That animal does not have the status of a Bechor. It doesn't have the Kedusha of a firstborn going to Beis HaMikdash as a Korban. It was given, but it belongs to a Goy and is now looked after by the Israel. But this is the animal, by the way, which we said is under the full responsibility, Tzon Barzel of the Jew. Okay? Now they split it, one to the Jew, one to the Goy. This animal, even this animal who belongs to the Jew, gave birth to an animal, to a Bechor. It doesn't go to Beis HaMikdash. Third generation, which is second generation in his house of the Jew, doesn't have the status of a Bechor. And the question is, why? Let's see again. The Vlodois of the animal, if they gave birth, they are potter from Bechora for the grandson, for the Enikol. Meaning that because we view the animal, the first one, as fully belonging to who? To the Goy. And this animal is, you're going to say, who's the father, right? So the father came from a Jew. The father is a Jew. As a Jewish animal. Lemaisa, because the animal came from a Goyish animal, still it maintains the status of what? Of an animal that is partially Goyish, so to speak, and therefore its baby is not a Bechor. And the question is, I mean, that's really bizarre, but even the first one, what did we just say? The Gemara doesn't explain what the question is, but the question is glaring. We apparently don't view that animal like a wad of cash that went to the hands of the Jew and belonged to the Jew. We view this animal like the hammer and the drill, which means we view this animal as belonging to the Goy, even though there's full responsibility on the Jew's side. We view it as belonging to the Goy to the point that it doesn't have to give, that even its child is Goyish and doesn't have the Bechora. Why? That's a stira, that's a contradiction. In our Mishnah, we say what? We say, no, look, it belongs to who? To the one keeping it, to the one breeding it, to the kibbutznik, the moshavnik, the one who's looking after it, we say belongs to him, and therefore, it's halva, ribis, oivavoy, because if it's not halva, it's not an issue of ribis, right? There are no ribis but drills and hammers. Masha'enken, when we have over here a Mishnah about bechorois, all of a sudden we view this animal as fully belonging to the goy, that even the children don't have bechora. What's going on over here? Does it belong to the giver or the receiver? That's a stira. That's a question. Answers the Gemara. We're going to have Abaye, then rejected by Rove. Omar Rove says Rove an answer. Abaye attempts to give an answer. Omar Abaye, lo kasha, it's not difficult. Ha de mekabel ali oinsa v'zoyla. Ha de lo kabel ali oinsa v'zoyla. Which means, what's kabel ali oinsa v'zoyla? As I explained to you, why is it that we say that the animal kill belongs to the receiver, to the one receiving, to the one breeding? Because he, the one receiving, has a responsibility over two things which are really, really, really not his fault. What? Oinsa. Some robber came, absolute oines. I looked after it like my child. Loleinu, somebody came and snatched it. The entire 1,000 shekel animal went away. That's oines, beyond my control. And zoila, the animal which was 1,000, there's fluctuation in the market of the sheep, now belongs 200. I have to come up with 800. Oh, that's why we said that the receiver, the one breeding, is the one that is like an owner because he has a responsibility. Says Abaye, very easy. I'm reading again. Oh, the Mekabel Ali owns the owner. In the case of a goy, of the Bechor, you know why the one and only owner is the goy? Because then the goy, the owner, was a nice guy, the goy, or maybe got some other favor there. And he says, I am the one responsible of, I, the owner, not you, the one receiving, not the worker, the breeding. I, the owner, maintain the responsibility that if anything happens to the animal, it's not your fault. The animal goes cheap by the market, not your fault. Of course, Avada, in such a case, the owner is the real owner. That's like the drill. That's like the hammer, right? If you borrow the drill or the hammer, yeah, okay, shoyl is chai b'ointzin. Oh, you borrow a drill and a hammer and for a whole month, and it's okay. Now the hammer is worth 10 shekels less because of the market prices. Of course, you don't have to pay 10 shekels. Ridiculous. That's obviously the case over there by the Bchor. And because the owner is the Goy, the original owner, Mimela, the Kinderlach, are potter from the Choira. In our Mishnah, the Loi Kabila Le'oints of Izoila. In our Mishnah, as I explained to you in the Mishnah, our Mishnah is the case in which what? The owner does not accept any losses. Any potential losses on the shoulders of the receiver, the recipient, and Mimela is the owner. And Chanami, such a case by a goy would also be Chayv B'choira. The one with the responsibility is like the owner. That's in our Mishnah. That's why it's ribis, because it's like halva. It's like the word of cash. Very good. Omar Lerove. So that could be actually a very good answer. In other words, depends who's responsible. If the recipient is responsible, then he's like the owner. It's like borrowing cash. Yeah, you borrowed cash and the cash is worthless. You have to give him right? I borrowed, let's say, shekels against the dollars. Now the shekel is worthless. I have to compensate you for the dollars. Yes, it does. People borrow like that. It's Amud Lamadad, but the index of the dollars. Yes, they do. Yeah, and so too, right? Mimela depends on that. The Shenken, if the responsibility is the owner, Mimela the owner, like the case of a goy and the Bchor, the owner remains the real owner. That could be actually for itself a good answer until Rava comes and Rava challenges Abaye. As though. Omar Rava. Now Rava is challenging Abaye, and he's asking two questions. If the owner is the one who basically stays with the responsibility of oins of Zoilo, if anything happens or if the price goes cheap, then if so, Son Barzel Kari Slay, how can he call it Son Barzel? The Mishnah in Bechoros also calls it Son Barzel. How did I explain to you Son Barzel? Son Barzel means that the investor or the woman, whoever the owner, knows he will always be fully compensated whatever happens. You can't call it Son Barzel. It's a semantic problem. How can you call it that way, right? So how can I say that's Son Barzel? Good answer, but it doesn't fit into the words. The Oid, another taina, another claim against the Baye. Adetani Seifa, what did our Seifa say? When the Seifa, the second part of our Mishnah, looked for a kosher way to do Tzon Barzel is what? Let's say I won't be involved in Tzon Barzel. What would I do? What did the Mishnah say? Aval mekablin Tzon Barzel mina akum, right? The Mishnah said, you know what is your kosher way of having a Tzon Barzel? I am a Jew. I want to have full responsibility over the animals that I receive. I want to share 50-50. Go to Tim McKenzie or Tom McKinley or Abdul Mahmoud. In other words, you can do it by going. Sounds like that's the only kosher way to have Tzon Barzel without ribis. Because by going, there's no ribis. Wait, liflog velitni bedidei. We have to add a word here. That's a famous question which we've seen many, many times in Gemara. Liflog velitni bedidei, which means why do you have to come to a faraway case? You can differentiate within the Mishnah itself. There's a closer case to the Reisha that is allowed. The Mishnah should have said, the Mishnah should have said, you know, when Tzon Barzel is treif, is a problem of ribis, the lokabil ali oinsev izoilo. When the owner, the real owner, the investor, did not accept upon himself the oinsev izoilo, meaning the only one responsible is who? Is the recipient. And that makes him to be a what? A borrower like money. And that's ribis. Aval kabil mara oinsev izoilo shapir dami. The Mishnah should have said, you know, when there's a kosher case of Tzon Barzel, I'll tell you what, if you call it Tzon Barzel. And that is what? If the owner stays with what? Stays with the full responsibility of anything happening to the animal, then Givaldig, then it's not alone. Then it's like getting the drill. There's no ribis involved. So why does the Mishnah have to run away to a case of a goy? The Mishnah should have differentiated between what? Between case 1 and case 2, whether who is responsible. We can stay with two Jews. You can remain in the same case of two Jews, one against the other, not against. One the investor, one the worker, one corresponding to the other. And the only difference is who got the achrayas. If the recipient got the achrayas, is like a borrower of money, and it's ribis and it's straight, ribis with money. And if he didn't receive the achrayas, only the owner did, meaning the owner completely exempted the worker from the achrayas, then it's good. We didn't say that. Must be something is wrong in your logic, Abaye. Ella, therefore, Marove, and that's the answer we're going to conclude. Yeah. Ella Omar Rove says Rove, Idi ve'idi, both our Mishnah and the Mishnah and Bechoros. We're back to the Mishnah and Bechoros. Both cases, the loy kabil alaymara oinsav zoila. In neither case, the owner has any responsibility. Meaning, in both cases, the owner is not responsible. Who is responsible? Who? The Jew. And in both cases, really, you should look at it as the owner, so to speak. The responsible person here is the recipient, the worker, the one feeding the animal in the moshav, in both cases. And the glaring question is, so why do we say that the animal belongs to the guy? Why do you say this animal belongs to the guy? And even this one is partially goyish. Why? We say that once it's given to the hands of the Jew, right? He's responsible, the Jew. The Jew is the owner. Says the Gemara, no. B'choros is a different din altogether. The gabe b'choros, regarding b'choros, Ainu time, there's a different reason. The vlodos p'turim min b'choros. You know why the vlodos, even the grandchildren, are potter from the b'choros? They don't have the sanctity of a korban b'choros. Kevan, that is because the ilo yahiv zuzi. What happens if the Jew fails to give the money? Remember, what kind of money? According to Rashbam, it's a one-off payment. The guy would say, hey, the animal went down in money. Instead of 1,000, it's 800. Hey, you Jew, pay me 200, right? According to Tosfos, it's what? It's a monthly fee. What happens if the Jew fails to pay the money? Well, in all the Hasidic stories, they put him in jail, right? In the dungeon, right? That's right. If Moshke didn't pay the poor, it's the money. In our case, it's different. If the Jew fails to give the money that he owes, Osi Nochri, the Nochri would come, the Goy owner would come, he would actually seize the original animal from the Jew. So that animal, although you could look at it as owned by the Jew because he's the one responsible, it's a Kmir V'lo Nitna, but because it's sort of eternally collateralized to the Goy, because that's automatic unspoken agreement. If you fail to give me the 200, I'll take the entire behema. Let's say he doesn't find the behema. The Jew managed to, make it run away, make it disappear, and now he doesn't find the behema. Now we understand the second generation. He will take those vlodois. He will take the babies. He will take the. Yeah. In other words, if this animal, he doesn't find it, the guy will take this animal. Because this animal is under danger, so to speak, always, being taken by the original guy. If you fail to pay him the monthly fee, let's say, that's why this animal also giving birth is potter min abchoira, and this animal too is not abchor. I want to tell you something that the Mishnah says there. Fourth generation. That's 3, that's 4. That is, yes, abchor. Here you have Kedushas Bechor. Here you have Kedushas Bechor. Why? Because this animal, the goy doesn't have any right to take anymore. I don't know why. I looked and I didn't see, but that's unspoken agreement. The goy and the Jew, if you fail to provide me with the money you owe me, I'll take this or that. But you cannot take this one. So the baby of this one is not collateralized by the goy, and therefore it's fully Jewish. Now, who cares that it's just collateralized by the goy? So what? Lamaisi belongs to the Jew. Says the Gemara of the Havi yad nochri ba'emtza. The head of the goy is in the middle. What does that mean? Any financial involvement of the goy with the animal makes it potter mibchoiro. The kol yad nochri ba'emtza potter min abchoiro. Anytime a goy is somehow financially involved with the animal of a Jew, okay? In that case, the Jew's animal is potter min abchoira, which means, let's summarize. In every case, goyim, Jews, bchoira, salvo, ribis, it's not confusing. Once the person who received the animal, or other investment, by the way, from the investor/owner, if you have full responsibility, you are like the current owner, so to speak, because if anything happens to that animal, you got to pay, or even if the price goes down by the market, nothing to do with your fault. It's like borrowing cash. Yeah, a borrowed cash, I have to give cash $100. I can't give 90 and tell you stories about the fluctuation. I have to give $100 with a new rate, right? Okay. Now, the question, and therefore it's a problem of ribis, right? If the person, the recipient, the one working, is giving him more than he actually invested, either according to Tosis as a monthly fee plus babies, according to Rashbam only babies, it's ribis, or avak ribis, it's a problem. What's the story over there with the guy? Very simple. True, the owner is a yid, not a guy. It's really a Jew who's now the owner because he's responsible. But the guy's shadow is hovering over. Why? Because if you fail to pay him what you're responsible for, the guy has the legal right. He's not a mean guy. The guy has the legal right to seize and snap and take and snatch what? This animal or that one. Therefore, because the guy is somehow involved, Yad Nochri Be'emtza, that he's potentially collateralizing it, therefore that is considered as not purely Jewish animal, and therefore Bechora doesn't apply to the animal. But that's a special thing for Ilchas Bechor. Yeah, because it says in the Pasuk, Israel, Bechor, but Israel says the Pasuk in Bamidbar, and therefore that's it. Therefore, if a guy is involved, it's part of an Bechora. Yeah. Yes. What do you mean owner? It's a Jewish owner because it's Jewish responsibility. Because the responsibility is fully on the Jews' shoulders, yeah, if it goes down in price, not his fault. If it was snatched by a UFO, craziest thing, it's not a show. It's like a show of money. Therefore, yes, he is fully responsible. Think of those terms which you already know. The Jew is like an owner because he has full responsibility regardless of what happens. That is a form of ownership, yes. However, the guy may take it, therefore, it's better from the Bechora because the guy has the right to charge it from him in case he fails to pay him cash. I don't know about that, actually. It's a good question. I wouldn't say it is a statement. What happens if, let's say, the owner who originally gave it was Tim McKenzie, and there's another guy, Mahmoud Abdul, who may snatch it. So then I don't know. I think it's still a problem. No. Because if a guy has it collateralized, it's bad enough. I don't know Hilchas Bechor is well enough, but I think even if it's not the original owner, it's still a problem or a solution. It depends how you look at having a Bechor. Yeah, in other words, because there's a guy here, Yad Nocher Be'emtza. There's a guy here right before the baby was born. We know that baby is collateralized, baby animal is collateralized to the guy. So I think it's bottom of the Bechor. I'm not so proficient in Hilchas Bechor, so I have to admit, but I think so. Yes, sir. Now we're about to begin something really, really interesting. Up until now, we thought, and we were right. The Mishnah told us, and the entire life, that's what we always grew up thinking, that a ribis from a goy is no problem whatsoever. People living in Chutzart say, oh, I don't have that headache. I'm not such a mumche. I don't know, Chase Manhattan, Barclays, maybe there are Jewish people there in the direct. I don't know who's the owner. The assumption is, yeah, your bank is goyim. There's no issue of ribis. In other words, they can take loan and borrow the chule beribis. Oh, so now we're going to see it's not so simple. And not a frumkeit. The Gemara is now actually trying to test the water and see, is it really okay to actually lend and borrow ribis from a guy? The Mishnah said it's okay. Yet, let's see. Says the Gemara. The Gemara brings down a pasuk. Ma behoinu beneshech v'tarbis. A person accumulates money through neshech and tarbis, which is not a good thing. You know it's neshech and tarbis, all kinds of what? Interest. And you want to amass money through that. At the end of the day, the one who is merciful to the dalim, the one who gives money to the poor, he will collect it. What does that mean? What does that mean? Amarav, says Rav, Kigoin Shvur Malka, a king called Shvur, which was the melech of Persia, the king of Persia, which is mentioned many times in the Gemara. What does he do? Shvur Malka, says Rashi, he would take money from Jews and give it to Goyim, Choin and Dalim. He would give it to those who are poor for mitzvahs. The Goyim they don't have mitzvahs, they're spiritually poor. And that Melech Shvur Malka, you know what he would do? If any Jew would make money from ribis, Shvur Malka would make sure to take away his money and give it to Goyim. He would pick on those Jewish, how do you say, usurers, right? And that is the punishment for someone who what? Somebody who, what does he do? Gives money and gets money beribis, gets money through ribis, yeah, that person is what? Will be punished, that his money will be taken by the government. Yeah, will be taken by taxes. Okay, interesting. Amar Nachman, what? Now, what? In the times of the Gemara, Shvur Malka, his mother was very pro-Jewish. Shvur Malka, his mother was Ifra Hurmiz. Ifra Hurmiz was a very, very pro-Jewish person. She had close relationship with Amoraim. She was very pro-Jewish, pro-rabbis. And she actually told her son, look, the Jews are so good and so smart. She did a lot of good propaganda for the Jews, so better than some people in this country, yeah? So basically, so he was in the times of the Gemara. I think Rabba or Rava was in touch with them, yeah? In any event, okay, so far, that's not a question. Because we could say what? Okay, a Jew lending to another Jew gets punished. Remember what we said a few days ago, and we'll see tomorrow? A person who makes money from what? From ribis, his money is going to implode. He's going to just, disappear. Amar Rav Nachman, however, comes Rav Nachman and tells us news. Amar li Huna, Rav Huna told me, lo nitzach ela dafilu ribis David korchovim. Oh, pala. Even ribis you give a goy, even ribis you take from a goy, you amass money from the goy, from the Mackenzie and McKinley and Abdullah, that money too will disappear. What's wrong with lending money to goyim and receiving interest from goyim? That's a big question. It's not our question. The Gemara asks the question. Rav asks Rav Nachman, look, it says before in the Torah. Let's not start with the Mishnah. It says in the Torah, Lenochri Toshich. It says you should be Meshich to the Nochri. Oh, the question is, what's Tashich? Remember, Lashich either means to. Lashich is to bite. Lashich is to be bitten. Yeah? And Linshach is to bite. As we know, there are two separate prohibitions in the Torah: to take ribis and bite from the flesh of the borrower, and also to be bitten. You're not allowed to what? Give ribis, borrow, and give ribis is not allowed either. My toshich, and it says by goy, you're allowed to be tashich. My tashich, what does tashich mean? Lav tishoich. Doesn't it mean that you're allowed to be noshech the goy? In other words, active, not passive. Doesn't the Torah tell me that it's absolutely right and good to be noshech, bite the goy with ribis and lend him beribis, be the active party and lend him beribis? Doesn't it say that? Isn't that what the Torah means? And therefore, what's your problem with me lending to a goy? And you're giving these curses that the government will take Khalil of the money? It says tashich, tishach is the same thing. Says the Gemara, loy, tashich. No. It says tashich. It says loy tashich, which means no. All the Torah tells you is you're allowed to be bitten by the goy. Maybe when the Torah says tashich, it's being specific and very grammatically correct. The Torah says lanochri tashich. Give him your other cheek. Excuse the pun. Yeah? Give the goy your flesh to bite, to be bitten, meaning you're allowed to borrow from the goy, from Barclays Bank, from Royal Bank of Scotland, from the goy you're allowed to borrow and give them ribis. But maybe to lend them beribis, maybe the Torah never allowed you. And it makes sense what we just said before. Maybe to lend the goy beribis is not allowed. Says the Gemara, lo, it doesn't make sense. Lo isagi, the lav hachi, does make sense, yeah? The lav hachi, because it doesn't make sense that the Torah would tell me something, the lav hachi, that I would have known anyway. La puk yachicha, the loy. Because what does the Torah comes to tell me? The Torah wants to tell me whatever you're not allowed to do to a Jew, you are allowed to do to a goy. Right? By the Jew, it says outright, it says already that by the Jew, I'm not allowed to have myself bitten. I'm not allowed to be bitten by Chaim Yankel, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Kalman. I'm not allowed to borrow money and give ribis to Jews. I already know that. So why does the Torah have to tell me about a goy? I have to explain to you something now. The Gemara at this point believes, and according to most Rishonim, it's true, there's no mitzvah to give the goy or receive from a goy. The Gemara wants to tell you, don't take ribbis from a Jew, but rather from a goy. But if the Torah already told me, don't take ribbis from a Jew, why is the goy relevant? There's no mitzvah to dafka borrow from the goy. So stam irrelevant. Who cares about the goy? The Torah told me specifically, don't borrow beribis from the Jew, not from Chaim Yankel, not from anybody. Therefore, what? What's the story? What does the Gemara what does the Torah have to talk about a goy? And says the Gemara, Lavo olav ba'aseh v'lo ta'aseh. No. Means like this. Yes, you're right. There's no mitzvah to borrow from a goy. However, if you borrowed from a yid, then you're over double wemo. You're over aseh and lot aseh. If you borrowed money from Bank Leumi without heter iska, and not from Bank of Scotland or Bank of Nigeria, yeah, if you borrowed from a Jew, you over loy taseh of loy toshich to a Jew, and also you over an aseh of yes to the goy. Meaning there's no mitzvah to borrow from the goy, according to most Rishonim except for the Rambam. There's no mitzvah to borrow from the goy beribis. But if you borrowed from a yid beribis without heter iska, then you over double aseh and lo taseh. So far, lemaisa, let's just summarize. We had this scare from where? From the pasuk that seems to be saying that it's a mitzvah or it's okay to borrow from to lend to a goy. Then we say no. Lending to a goy is not mentioned in the Torah whatsoever. Toshich means what? To borrow from the goy is not a mitzvah, but the Torah tells you should not borrow from a Jew, but rather from the goy, which means not that it's a mitzvah to the goy. It means to tell you if you borrowed with beribis from a Jew, you over double trouble aseh and lo taseh. But lemaisa regarding lending to the goy, we don't see anything written. We don't see anything written in the Torah so far, assumingly at this point, we don't see that the Torah forbids or permits to borrow from a goy. Maybe, and we see the pasuk from the Novi, that to lend to the goy seems to be not okay. So that so far seems to be so good. To borrow from a goy is just something in the context of a Jew. To lend to a goy beribis may or may not be okay. Leaves us room for enechinami, what we just saw now, that seems to be an issue to lending to goy beribis seems to be not 100% okay. I just want to point out something, just not to confuse you. La halacha that I remember seeing years ago, to lend to a goy beribis, yeah, I'll keep it for later. Keep you in suspense, because we're not yet done with lending to goy beribis is gonna be an issue. But I'm hearing your question, yeah. But here comes the big question from our Mishnah. Loivin mehen umalvin oisem beribis. It's all very nice when the psukim, you pushed me, you deflected it, that it's not halva, it's to borrow. But the Mishnah says outright, black on white. The Mishnah says loivin mehen umalvin oisem, both ways. You're allowed to what? Lend and borrow. Lend to goy beribis. It's a Mefurish Mishnah. Even the Ger Toishav was a really nice guy. Yeah, he's a guy who lives in Eretz Yisrael, keeps Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. And what? And yet you're allowed to lend beribis. So how do you manage with your pasuk that gives a curse to people who lend beribis? Omar Rav Chia Breder Ravuna, lo nitzrecha ela. It's only true bichdei chayov. Which means mida oraisa, you're allowed to lend to a goy. However, Rabbanan, says Rashi, made a gzera bichdei chayov only if you need it for your parnasa. If you need the minimum parnasa, and that's the parnasa you have, is to be a usurer for goyim. Many times in history, Jews were only allowed to work as usurers because the goyim wanted them to be hated by society. So they told the Jews that's almost the only, in some communities, only 4 professions the Jews could work in. If that's the only work you can do, b'kdei chayav, you need your bread and milk and a roof over your head, that minimal amount you're allowed to lend to a goy and get ribis. But to start against a business of ribis and lend to goyim right, left, and center and amass millions, that is not allowed. Why isn't it allowed? Says Rashi, the first Rashi, Dilma oti misrach. You're going to get so used to lending beribis then you're not going to check the tzitzis and the kippah of the person. A person would come to you and will not be exactly a goy. His name is Mackenzie, but his mother is Rosenzweig. In America, I've heard science fiction. There are people like that, right? The father is a goy, the mother is a Jewish. Almost unheard of, but maybe. So then what? You're laughing. So then what? In such a case, it's a sakana. You start with lending to going too much, you get into the habit. It's a slippery slope. You may come to do it to Jews. Therefore, the klolo of the Navi is on people who just take it too far. Midorabanan, that's not allowed. Midoraisa, that's allowed because Midoraisa, it's allowed. Rabbanan said, keep it to a minimum. What's K'dei Chayov? That's a good question. Do you need 3 vacations a year in Chutz La'aretz? That's a question. What's K'dei Chayov? That's another issue. That's answer number 1. So see, it's not so pashut. Wow. So lending to going beribis is allowed within limit. Only if you need it for your livelihood and, to keep the minimum, money that you need. Ravina Omar, speaking of good relationship with goyim, look at the following answer. An Aleph Amud Aleph. Ravina says, over here, Betalmidei Chachamim askinan. Our what? Our Mishnah that allows you to lend to goyim with no limitations, says Ravina, unlike the previous answer. Talmidei Chachamim are allowed to lend to goyim right, left, and center. Why? Why did Rabbanan actually tell us not to lend to goyim? Not because you're going to come to lend to Jews. Shema yilmod mimasov, Ellen. If you get too buddy with a goy, and you're a regular person, not a Talmid Chacham, a person who's not a Talmid Chacham is more susceptible to be influenced, bad influence of the goyim. In other words, if you start a whole lending business to the goyim, you lend them beribis, they may not like you, but they do befriend you. You seem to be the rich guy in their eyes. You befriend them. You're going to start learning from the maisim. Today, your friend in the bank, then your friend on Facebook, Instagram, yeah, you already be too friendly. And therefore, Chachamim made a gzera on regular Jews not to lend beribis. Talmid Chacham is different. Talmid Chacham is allowed to lend to goyim. Why? Because the Talmid Chachamu lo yilmod mimaso. Because it's a Talmid Chacham, we are sure a real Talmid Chacham with good midos and never lies and all the very high standards of Talmid Chacham. Not anybody knows a bit of learning yet. A real Talmid Chacham, we trust him not to learn from the bad ways of the goy, and therefore we say he can lend to the goy, while other people are not allowed to lend to goy. So the first answer says all Jews are equal, depends on the amount. Everybody can lend to a goy a certain minimal amount, get minimal amount of ribis, k'dei chayav. So bread, butter, matzahs, and a tiyul and cholamoid. I don't know what's k'dei chayav, tiyul, whatever. Mashenken, over the top, that's not allowed. Yeah, that's too much. You may, lose yourself. The second answer differentiate between types of yidden. A yid who is not a Talmid Chacham, according to this, should not lend bichlal. Interesting. Yeah, he should not learn bichlal from Maisav. He should not learn from the Maisav, and the guy should not lend. A Talmid Chacham is allowed to lend to a guy, even millions and billions, because he's not going to learn from the bad ways of the guy. That's what it seems in the Gemara. I have to see in the Mefarshim, but that seems to be the difference between the two answers in the Gemara. Yeah. Okay, the shiur is officially over. Question time. Thank you very much. Have a great day. And I'd love to see you tomorrow again, continuing our Amud Yomi Avos Shalom. Thank you to all YouTubers and Torah Anytime viewers. Thank you all.